Welcome back. The film opens at Gensice, a genetic therapy pharmaceutical company. A female ape designated No. 9 and known as Bright Eyes by the staff has been given the drug ALS 112 and has shown considerable progress. She is more sociable and calmer than normal apes and has succeeded in completing the Towers of Hanoi puzzle in 20 moves, which is close to a perfect score of 15. Will Rodman talks to his boss, Steve Jacobs, and convinces him that he has data to enable them to proceed with human trials for the drug. The next day, Rodman and Jacobs appear before the board of directors in the Gensice conference room. Will explains that the new drug causes neurogenesis, the growth of new brain cells, something that doesn't typically happen after birth, and may heal any number of degenerative brain disorders, such as Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. The only side effect is that the subjects exposed to the drug have a green sparkle in their eyes. Back in the lab, the senior ape caretaker, Robert Franklin, is having trouble coaxing Bright Eyes out of her cage. She acts aggressively toward Robert and the other helpers. They attempt to lure her out of the cage with orange soda, but when they try to wrangle her with a lasso pole, she goes ape and runs rampant through the building. The chase ends when she crashes through the glass window of the conference room and the building's security guards kill her. Fearing that what they witnessed with Bright Eyes is a violent side effect of the drug, Jacobs pronounces the drug project dead. Will attempts to change his mind, but Jacobs refuses, claiming he wants the remainder of the test apes put down. After returning to the lab, Robert shows Will a baby ape hidden in Bright Eyes' cell. This explains that their assumption was an error. Bright Eyes was not acting violently because of the drug, but to protect her child. Robert does not have the heart to put down the baby and gives the task to Will. Unwilling to do so, he decides to take the baby home. Will returns home, where he lives with his father, Charles. Charles suffers from Alzheimer's and needs care from a nurse when Will is not around. Will shows the baby ape to Charles, who soon takes a liking to it. Charles playfully calls the baby Keezer. Due to his love of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, it is implied. Keezer soon shows incredible progress, able to feed himself after only 2 days. He has apparently contracted the virus-based ALS 112 from his mother. His temporary residence with Will extends to 3 years, and Will sets up a room for him in the attic. Though ape-like in some ways, the now half-grown Keezer is a beloved member of the family and shows great intelligence. While Caesar has been showing mental growth, Charles' Alzheimer's is getting worse, and he has an altercation with his nurse. Will takes a major risk and steals ALS 112 from Gensice. He gives a dose to Charles, and it appears it is a miracle drug when the next day, Will finds his father sitting at the piano, playing perfectly. Meanwhile, Keezer has grown enamored of watching the neighbors playing outside and escapes out the window into their neighbor's backyard. However, his appearance frightens the neighbor's daughter and her father. Hunsaker angrily attacks Keezer. Will and Charles manage to rescue Caesar, but not before Hunsaker has injured him. Will sneaks Caesar into a zoo for treatment. Keezer is treated by a veterinarian there named Carolina Ranha. During the procedure, Caroline is fascinated by how well Caesar knows sign language. He even implies through sign language that Will and Caroline should go out to dinner. Counters Caesar's wanderlust. They take him across the Golden Gate Bridge to a redwood forest for some outdoor playtime. Upon arriving at the forest, Keezer will not leave Will, but makes a supplication gesture of extending out arm, palm up, which is his way of asking for permission to play. Will gives his permission, and Keezer takes to the trees. 5 years later, Caroline is living as part of the Rodman family, and Keezer has grown. Will has even started dressing him in a shirt and pants. During a visit to the forest, Keezer is barked at angrily by a dog, and he counters with a primal cry that scares it off. Will notices that Keezer seems sad and confused about just what he is. They drive past Gensis, and Will explains to Caesar about the drug that made him more intelligent, as well as the death of his mother. In the 5 years since he was given ALS 112, Charles' condition has deteriorated. Will reasons that his immune system has developed antibodies and a more aggressive virus is needed. Will takes a risk by going to Jacobs, confessing his secret experiment with his father, and explains that the drug not only repairs cognitive damage, but makes people smarter. He says he has reworked the virus and needs Jacobs to approve new animal testing. Back at home, Charles gets confused and wanders outside and into their neighbor's car. He attempts to drive it but ends up damaging it. Hunsaker, The same neighbor who attacked Keezer angrily pulls Charles from the car. In his demented state, Charles is unable to convey his reasons for being there. Caesar watches this from his window in the attic, and upon seeing the neighbor yelling and angrily pushing Charles, rushes out of the house. He attacks Hunsaker, throwing him to the ground, jumping on him, beating him, and finally biting off a finger. Charles recognizes Keezer and yells, "Keezer, no!" Keezer backs off and goes to Charles. The incident causes Keezer by court order to be taken to a primate sanctuary by animal control. Will and Caroline walk him in and say goodbye. The sanctuary proves to be tough on Caesar during his first days. It is run by John Landon, with the care of the animals supervised by his short-tempered and abusive son Dodge and a timid man named Rodney. When Keezer flings his food at Dodge and laughs, the young man angrily responds by turning a fire hose on him, forcing a cowering Keezer into a corner of his cage. When released with the other animals into the main play area, Keezer meets the alpha male of the group, an ape named Rocket. Rocket tears off Caesar's shirt and beats him. Keezer also takes note of a gorilla named Buck in a locked cage and an orangutan across from his cage who speaks sign language. Quietly, Keezer begins to communicate with the orangutan, Maurice. The sanctuary ships 12 apes to Gensice for the testing of the newer version of ALS 112, which is named ALS 113. Will is once again in charge of the testing and chooses a rather harried ape named Koba as his first subject. Koba is strapped down and given the new drug through a breathing mask. However, Koba struggles, and the hose comes off the machine. Almost everyone in the lab has their breathing masks on, except Robert, who is accidentally exposed. That night, we'll take some of the ALS 113 homes to treat his father. Charles refuses the treatment and dies that night in his sleep. After Will and Caroline pack up the remainder of Charles' belongings, Will's eyes fall on a copy of Julius Caesar. Sometime afterward, Dodge brings some of his friends into the cage area at the sanctuary, where Keezer manages to steal a pocket knife from one of the visitors. Keezer befriends the large gorilla in the yard named Buck, who is never let out of his cage by letting him loose. Next, he releases Rocket, who ventures into the yard. Keezer hits him with a steel gas can. Rocket is ready to fight, but realizes that Buck is loyal to Caesar and will protect him, so he submits. Keezer is now the alpha male. Caesar later lets Rocket out of the cage area and allows him to give stolen cookies from Dodge one to each ape, bringing solidarity to the group. Keezer has also found a walkway and controls to the windowed enclosure at the top of the play area. Will returns to work, where he finds that Jacobs has greedily and recklessly pushed the research schedule ahead. While Jacobs is largely thinking of business profits, Will warns him that the major hurdle they need to worry about is how the newer ALS 113 will affect humans. When Jacobs refuses to listen to Will's warnings, Will quits Genesis. Meanwhile, Robert has been experiencing side effects from his exposure to the virus, including sneezing that produces droplets of blood from his sinuses. Will returns to the ape sanctuary and attempts to bribe John Landon into letting him have Keezer. John is willing to do so, but when Will coaxes Keezer to go with him, Keezer refuses. That evening, Keezer busts out through the window he found and goes back home. He steals ALS 113 from Rodman's refrigerator and gives it to the apes at the preserve. The next day, John Landon observes the apes having something like a conference. The apes scatter, playing it off. Landon dismisses it as just something weird. That night, the apes are returning to their cages, but Keezer balks, confronting and defeating Dodge in the yard. When grabbed, Dodge says, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." Caesar speaks audibly for the first time, shouting no. The other caretaker is a witness and runs into the cage area, trying to rescue the now unconscious Dodge. The apes attack him, but Keezer calls them off and, in a show of mercy, puts him into Caesar's cage. Dodge tries to escape and gets killed. He is holding a cattle prod and Keezer hits him with the fire hose. At dawn, Will calls to check on Caesar but receives no answer. Driving over to investigate, he finds the facilities wrecked, the apes gone, and the ALS 113 canisters open in the cage areas. He decides to raise the alarm. Meanwhile, the apes are making their way across town. Keezer divides them into two groups. Buck goes with one group to the zoo to liberate the apes there, while Caesar leads the second group to Genesis. The news about the ape escape is relayed to Jacobs, who has just made his way to work. He finds that Keezer and the other apes have taken over the building and freed the 12 AL's 113 test subject apes. The police are called in. Jacobs boards a police helicopter as Keezer and Buck's groups join forces, now some 50 to 60, chimps, orangutans, and gorillas strong. However, the apes seem to be intentionally preventing the deaths of humans they encounter. Will and Caroline have heard about the rampage, and upon learning that the apes are headed for the Golden Gate Bridge, they surmise that Keezer is leading the apes to the Redwood Forest. The officers are waiting on the bridge to fire on the apes, but Keezer again divides his forces. One group climbs the suspension cables, while another swings from the underside of the structure to get past the blockade. In the helicopter, Jacobs catches sight of Keezer and orders the men to shoot at him, reasoning that the death of Caesar will call off the others. However, as the helicopter hovers low to the bridge, Buck leaps onto it, bringing it down at the cost of his own life. Keezer feels sadness over the loss of his comrade, and soon finds the remains of the helicopter precariously clinging to the side of the bridge, with Jacobs pleading for help. Instead, Keezer turns away and Koba pushes the helicopter off, killing Jacobs upon impact with the water. The apes proceed into the forest. Will and Caroline have made their way onto the bridge. Will steals a police car and heads for the forest. He calls out Caesar's name, but is accosted by one of his followers. However, Keezer soon appears, and the others back away. Will attempts to reconcile with his friend, promising that if Keezer comes home with him, he'll protect him. Keezer shocks Will by holding him close and whispering, "Keezer is home." Will watches as Keezer and several other apes climb up into the trees and survey the forest, and the world beyond. In an aftermath sequence, we see Will's neighbor Hunsiker reporting for duty as a pilot at San Francisco International Airport. As he walks to his plane, he realizes that he is bleeding from his nose. As the camera pans up, we see the digital boards flashing to different destinations, a sign that soon, these places will be infected with AL's 113, sealing mankind's fate. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching.